I believe you've already asked me that, and I said I did not write the Ramsey note, no.
And did you have anything to do with the death of your daughter?
No, sir, I did not.
I base my opinion on that I know my wife. I would stake my life on the fact that she did not murder her child. She go back and start afresh. Include the Ramseys in the investigation, but go back and do what's never been done before. Follow the evidence, investigate the suspects thoroughly, and don't wear blinders and look only inside the Ramsey household.
Touch DNA. It's a relatively new science, but it in fact showed that there was DNA evidence on the pajama bottoms that in fact once profiled constituted irrefutable evidence that it's the DNA of the person that was there at that crime scene and murdered this child.
Okay, I want to start out by saying just thank you for everyone for watching and supporting. Nothing attached to it, just saying thank you. Also, forgive me a little under the weather, but just kind of kicking some tires here with Lin Wood. Just trying to get to know him a little bit more. So essentially, I guess he was hired for the defamation side and the libel side to protect the Ramseys from, being attacked by, news outlets and sources that they felt were being very direct. And I will say that, the news media in this case, in these terms, sometimes they were a little bit irresponsible in essentially accusing somebody formally to a broad audience. So here we go, and we're going to have some periodic intermissions of learning a little bit more about Lin Wood. So if you want to learn more about this channel, though, this is coming from Political Agendas. Pretty good amount of videos. So if you're interested, drop in, say what's up. This is Political Agendas. That's what the page looks like, and has about 5K subs. So,
as we've been reporting this week, for the first time, Patsy Ramsey answered questions under oath about the murder of her daughter, JonBenet. John and Patsy Ramsey are being sued by a man they say, quote, represented too many unanswered questions in JonBenet's death. It's been nearly 5 years since the little girl was murdered, and no arrests have been made. Lin Wood is the lawyer for the Ramsey family. Mr. Wood, good morning.
Good morning, Katie.
Why was this the first time that Patsy Ramsey answered questions under oath? That seems awfully strange to people, since this investigation has been going on for almost 5 years.
Well, she's never been asked to testify under oath before. The interviews that she's given, they consist of probably 70 hours of police interviews, police questioning. There was never a request that she testify under oath or be interviewed under oath. That would not be routine police procedure. You're expected to tell the truth when you talk to the police, and obviously in a civil case, when you give a deposition, you're sworn under oath to tell the truth. Either way, Patsy Ramsey has told the truth from day one to the present time.
Can you briefly explain why John and Patsy Ramsey were questioned in this particular case by New York attorney Darnay Hoffman?
Darnay Hoffman is the lawyer who represents Chris Wolf. Chris Wolf is an individual who was a suspect in the JonBenet Ramsey murder, because his then-girlfriend went to the police and informed them that she thought, for a variety of reasons, that he may very well have been involved in the murder. The Ramseys, in their book, The Death of Innocence, identified correctly and accurately that Chris Wolf was a police suspect, that he did represent unanswered questions. And Mr. Hoffman, for reasons that we think are primarily related to publicity, filed this lawsuit alleging that Chris Wolf had been libeled and that his reputation had been somehow harmed by the statement of the truth that he was a suspect.
The authorities did investigate him, did they not?
They did investigate him. The question of whether they investigated him thoroughly is obviously one that remains on the table. The more we learn...
So, if you watch Lin Wood over time, what you will notice, and if you read through the interviews where he is present with Patsy, and in some cases John, and even in the depositions that we've kind of looked at here on the channel, you will notice that a lot of times Lin Wood jumps in the middle of things. And for me, Lin Wood really represents an individual that you have to keep your eye on. And I almost dare to say birds of a feather flock together. And as you continue to study this case, and I'm going to pull it up, but the first kind of intermission, continue to study this case, you kind of see that the legal language is sort of tampered with. And I think it's important to be careful about whether we're trying to um, get justice or if we're trying to play um, court and try to see who is the best philosopher. That's dangerous because one might say, oh, I'm the best philosopher. I can find this, I can twist that, I can make people see it this way. That's being persuasive. Of course, as a lawyer, you need that. And of course, you always want to defend your client. We got that. But somebody can be seriously injured in the course of you playing lawyer the wrong way. So let's kind of jump over really quickly here to this first intermission to get a better introduction of Lin Wood. So give me just a second. So in our first installment here, you're looking at an article by Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And this article may not be widely available. If you're able to access it through a university or something like that, then you can do that. But just going to read through some of it. Lin Wood, as some of you may or may not know, and if you don't know, if you're interested, you probably aren't. He was sort of, he faced an uphill battle when he started some situation with, recently, when he started this situation in 2020 about voter fraud and stuff like that, and people stealing the vote, and he claimed that even some Republicans, even some Republicans were in on it and stuff like that. So essentially, not only Democrats but Republicans are also equal opportunity targets. So Lin Wood is, Lin Wood is gonna fire off on you. It doesn't matter who you are. Lin Wood is gonna fire off on you. So I highlighted some selected portions, and it's kind of funny because when I say birds of a feather flock together, you'll see why. So, title of the article is Trump defender Lin Wood gives up law license. Atlanta lawyer had faced possible disbarment over bizarre behavior, and this was in July of 2023. And so, starts talking about from Richard Jewell to Donald Trump. Atlanta attorney Lin Wood represented some of the most high-profile figures of his day. Another client, apparently, this is funny. Another client, though, apparently upended Wood's legal career himself, facing possible disbarment over bizarre behavior in and out of the courtroom. He is relinquishing his license to practice law, notified Georgia about his resignation on Independence Day. And so that Lin is doing it on Independence Day just to kind of, say that he's fighting for you. Because this is what I'm saying. Similarity and commonality, number one. John, some of you ask quite frequently, why is JonBenet's death on the 25th? If you ask John, he's going to tell you, for the on her headstone. He's going to tell you, John is going to tell you, for the purposes of celebration. We want her name to be attached with Christmas, essentially, as I understand it. Is what he was saying in the article. So Lin Wood, kind of along the same lines, does things in terms of symbolism. And so we can now start to kind of pull together when we analyze and review John and Patsy and people that surround them, people that they connect with. Because your language, you only connect with people where your language is kind of the same, right? If you notice that just depending, you might hear somebody in the store and they're talking in a certain way, and you say, why don't I connect with that individual? Why don't I connect with that person? And you might notice that maybe the things that they're talking about or the way that they're talking, you don't like. And if you think, or if you're sort of cerebral in that moment, you might say to yourself, why don't I like this individual? What have they done to me that makes me kind of think this about them? and you might start to understand, oh, I don't like the cadence in which they talk. I don't like their accent, or I don't like the way that it seems like they are, so and essentially what you're saying in that moment is that I don't identify with that person. So guess what? I would not connect with this person. That means I won't reach out to them. I won't say anything to them. Even if they say anything to me, I won't offer information. I will only offer information to people where we have this conversation, or if they're saying something, and maybe they're in the the store and they're playing with their grandchildren or something like that. And you have grandchildren yourself, so you're like, hey, I love my grandchildren. This individual looks like they love their grandchildren. Maybe my grandchildren need playmates. I might say something. This individual looks like they're nicely dressed. They look like, they sound like they talk very well, and they sound like they have a good head on their shoulders. I would like to reach out and say something just by making a little joke. And so when we think about this in the context of this JonBenet Ramsey case, this is kind of how individuals come together. If Lin Wood is talking about sort of this symbolism, then you can definitely expect to hear some of the same kinds of symbolism in terms of John and Patsy Ramsey. And so the state bar dropped 2 disciplinary cases against Wood on Wednesday in documents filed with the Georgia Supreme Court. The bar said Wood's resignation has achieved the goals of disciplinary action, including protecting the public and the integrity of the judicial system and the legal profession. Scrolling down a little further. On a social media site, Telegram, where Wood posted conspiracy theories and religious commentaries since Twitter banned him in 2001. See, he doesn't learn his lesson. Twitter banned him for talking crazy and violating guidelines, and Lin just doesn't learn. He described the bar's investigation as persecution. Again, where have you heard this kind of language of somebody's persecuting me, right? When the Ramseys, I'll tell you, when the Ramseys were labeled under the umbrella of suspicion, they took issue with that. Strong issue. It's a meaningless statement. You're under the umbrella of suspicion. Patsy was mad. What does that even mean? She was upset about that. And they came back by saying, we're under, instead of the umbrella of suspicion, they came back and said they're under the parasol of persecution, trying to, kind of play on the same kind of words. Here we see that Lin Wood also thinks that he is being persecuted. I'm doing the right thing. Nobody understands me, blah, blah, blah. He also said he was at peace with his decision to give up his license. I love this. He said, describing lawfare as a tool of the devil that he forsakes, while suggesting that he is not finished battling his adversary. So he tries to make this religious. Again, who else do we know tries to make things religious? John and Patsy Ramsey, more specifically, Patsy more than John, and John just kind of tagged along. I made a note here that I wanted to read. What is lawfare? I want to get some clarity on that. The strategic use of legal proceedings to intimidate or hinder an opponent. In other words, you use a legal system like lawsuits, investigations, or official complaints as a weapon to hurt or silence your opponent rather than seek justice. So, going on to say, it's really a perspective of, let me see here. It's really a perspective of, looking at law not to solve problems, but to run interference, as we know. LA man's, I don't know why I dictated this. So, I see. So I said a layman's definition according to ChatGPT. So I was like, let me just make sure I understand correctly what I'm saying. So the layman's sort of term for this is that is law theories like using the law to run interference, stall progress, damage reputations, or tie someone up in court, tie someone up in the legal process. So essentially about weaponizing the process itself to sort of slow somebody down, drain their resources, and control the narrative. And that's huge because Lin Wood is saying, I am being persecuted. This is a tool of the devil. He is sort of his claim to fame has been defamation. If he in the game for 46 years, his claim to fame has been defamation for a long time. And so for him to say, and he's used some of these tactics a lot of times to sort of tie people up, tie up resources, going at CBS, going at different people for lawsuits over any little thing. And now it's kind of coming back full circle. But he calls it the devil is against me. The devil is battling me. My adversaries are essentially being used by the devil. While initially he won the praise, so he had a lawsuit, I think was his first one, would turn Jewel's case into an examination of the media's rush to judgment, winning settlements from several news outlets. This is huge, very huge, because Lin Wood's tagline is the media's rush to judgment. He always says that. Rush to judgment. The media rush to judgment. They didn't give the Ramseys a chance. So that this is his bread and butter. When we talk about lawyers' strategies, this is Lin Wood telling you, this is my bread and butter. This is how I'm going to attack every single thing. If you're a business owner, if you're a teacher, if you're a professional, blue collar, white collar, and you go about doing your job, and the manager, or you are the manager, whatever you do, you have a job to do, and there's a certain way that you carry out your niche. And if you pay attention, you'll notice it. And so this is Lin Wood's way of carrying out his niche. I'm going to be the lawyer that looks at defamation lawsuits. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to attack and say the media rush to judgment. I'm going to focus on suing the media, is his kind of focus or claim to fame. So Jewel's lawsuit against the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which had been the first to report Jewel as was a suspect, was dismissed in 2011 after the appeals court ruled that the newspaper's reporting was substantially correct at the time of publication. Jewel died in 2007 at the age of 44. Eric Rudolph was arrested for what was being claimed. While he initially won praise for standing up for Jewel, Wood's hard-nosed tactics eventually antagonized not only opposing lawyers, but others in the legal community. And we know this because we've seen what he did with Michael Caine, when he and Michael Caine were going back and forth, and Michael Caine was frustrated and said, man, look, I'm done, because you're obfuscating. And so another kind of style to say, man, look, you're antagonizing people, not only opposing lawyers, but others in the legal community. So it's not just, this is his personality, to be antagonistic. So anytime you see Lin Wood, you're going to see him antagonistic. His argument style is going to be diversion, right? When you talk to him, God bless his spouse, because, and if he has not matured in that arena or that realm, nobody's perfect, but God bless her, because, or him, doesn't matter. God bless the spouse, because although if I'm thinking about Lin Wood, I think I know the answer. But anyways, God bless the spouse, because if that individual is trying to talk to Lin Wood to keep himself from being persecuted by his spouse will say, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or he asks questions. You might be talking about, we ate at Red Lobster yesterday, or we stopped by for a quick bite at Burger King. And Lin, you wanted Burger King, I didn't. And Lin will say, to try to prove a point, well, what about, the fact that, when I asked you what you wanted, you didn't say anything. You just let me go to Burger King. And the individual will respond back, I know, I understand I said that, but I'm saying I did that for you. Yeah, but you had an opportunity to, and also all the other times where, we went to your place of to eat, or your restaurants. Lin, that's not what we're talking about. Now we're taking the conversation to another place. You're diverting the conversation from this being about the way you acted at Burger King and how I did something for you and I got rejected or disrespected because of it. Now you're trying to bring in all the other times that have nothing to do with this. Diversion, right? So that's his style. He's combative and it's counterproductive. This is what his peers are saying about him. He's combative, he's antagonistic, he's counterproductive, and he's an obfuscationist. So Ted Pound, an Atlanta lawyer who represented clients in medical malpractice cases filed by Wood, said in an interview Wednesday, "It keeps matters going. They become grudge matches between lawyers." At the same time, going into him talking about different people and the conspiracy theories and all such as that about the election outcome, and just kind of talking about that in general. During this time, as he was talking about that, um, he was involved in a bitter lawsuit with former colleagues who claim he defamed them after failing to share legal fees with them. So essentially, he was working with some people at his firm, and they said, "Man, you didn't share we all worked on this case. You didn't share the legal fees with us." And he went on and he went on Telegram and just started kind of letting them have it. And so they sued him for it. So I'll jump back in the video. I have 2 or 3 more articles, but I'll jump back into the video now that we know a little bit more about your boy.
One that remains on the table. The more we learn in this litigation about the investigation by Boulder of Chris Wolf and others, it becomes very clear that many legitimate suspects, including Chris Wolf, have never been thoroughly investigated by the Boulder Police Department.
Such as?
Well, I don't want to name names, but I will tell you that Chris Wolf has not been cleared in this investigation. And we know this, Katie, we know that the police department, primarily led by 2 individuals, Steve Thomas and Commander Eller, who had never had any homicide experience prior to the JonBenet Ramsey case, clearly put on blinders for the first 10 months of the investigation and really refused to...
That's a lie. Steve Thomas had experience, and he's told you Steve Thomas had experience in small towns, in Atlanta, and now bringing his experience to the JonBenet Ramsey case in homicide investigations.
To go anywhere in terms of legitimate investigation except to look at the Ramseys. So anyone in Boulder who does not have an alibi, who was capable of committing a brutal, perverted murder of a small child, legitimately still should remain under suspicion and be investigated.
If that is...
How because Chris Wolf was a reporter, if I understand it. You know what I mean? Like, capable. I mean, anybody's capable. And I don't know much about Chris Wolf. You know what I mean? But like, capable in what sense? You know what I mean? Like, because now you're just throwing people's names out there. Capable in what sense? You know what I mean? Like, do I have a history or a pattern of doing this that they've shown at this point in time? You know what I mean? For you to say that I would do this to this little girl. You know what I mean? Capable in what sense? So now we see again the Ramseys and their team continue to throw people's names out, and they try to skirt around. From what we see here, they try to skirt around with legal language, and the way they do it to try to protect themselves. But you're really throwing people's names out, and you're going up to the point and pulling back. You're going up to the legal line and pulling back. That's consistent. That's indicative of the kind of behavior and the level of risk that you're willing to take. More so risk seeking. I'm right there at the line, or sometimes I cross over that line. But if somebody doesn't know the law, they can't check me.
It's the case, though, Mr. Wood. Why can you not raise possibilities of suspects here this morning without naming names? In other words, with no other suspects, obviously the attention remains on John and Patsy Ramsey. Are there legitimate leads in your estimation that have not been followed other than people who have some kind of history in this?
Katie, I don't believe that the police have ever thoroughly investigated or followed up on, in all probability, any lead outside of the Ramsey theory that they have pursued. A theory that I might add is basically, from what I've learned, based on thin air. The Ramseys are not the only individuals that have been deposed in this case. I have taken the sworn testimony under oath of Police Chief Mark Beckner, of former District Attorney Alex Hunter, former Detective Steve Thomas, one of the Ramsey's accusers in his book.
For immediate release, April 8th of 1997. Ramsey investigation update number 37. April 8th. I don't even think the Ramseys have come in and spoken to investigators? I don't think so. I think they did it at the end of April. But I don't think the Ramseys have even come in and spoken to investigators at this point on April the 8th of 1997. Boulder police today confirmed that Detectives Steve Thomas and Ron Gosich visited Charlotte. They went out of state. Charlotte, North Carolina, to follow up on the Ramsey investigation. The detectives were in Charlotte April 6th and 7th. Charlotte police contacted Boulder police following their arrest of John Brewer Eustace because of similarities in his case and that of JonBenet Ramsey. Following an extensive interview with Eustace, Detectives Thomas and Gosich were able to conclusively rule him out as a suspect in the Charlotte Police Department, as we have been of other law enforcement agencies, or we are appreciative of this help from the Charlotte Police, as we have been with other agencies throughout the investigation. And I guess this is a good time for another intermission. Judge, this is March 17 of 2024. So we're tracking from the summer of 2023, where Lin Wood first got in hot water, to approaching the summer of the next year. Lawyer made false comments. Retired attorney said former colleagues were extortionists. Retired Atlanta defamation attorney Lin Wood made false and defamatory comments about his ex-colleagues, with whom he's in a years-long battle over client fees, a federal judge has determined. Wood repeatedly labeled 3 attorneys who worked in his Atlanta law firm as criminal extortionists, court records show. Wood encouraged hundreds of thousands of social media followers to file complaints against the attorneys, Nicole Wade, Jonathan Grunberg, and Taylor Wilson, with the State Bar of Georgia, saying they should be disbarred. U.S. District Judge Michael L. Brown noted in an order on Tuesday. Wood's 2021 public posts on the Telegram app about his former colleagues came as he was under investigation by the State Bar of Georgia, in part due to his behavior toward them, records show. Tellingly, Wood does not even try to show his accusations were true, Brown said. Indeed, he admits Wade, Grunberg, and Wilson did not commit the crime of extortion. So he's literally on television just saying stuff, saying that the Ramseys were the only ones being investigated when the cops went to Charlotte to check up on some other leads. And they gave you a specific name. Now you're out here saying things about your ex-peers, your ex-colleagues, and you're saying that you guys should be disbarred because you're trying to extort me. But then you come back and say, oh, no, I admit that they didn't commit the crime of extortion. So why are you saying that? Why are you broadcasting that to thousands of people? Hundreds of thousands of people. Why are you doing that? See what I'm saying? Like little stuff. Now we know that you are capable of just saying things. Now it's I get if you slip up, you say something wrong. I get that. I respect that. Maybe you come back and correct it if you remember it. But if you are like willingly just saying things about people, just saying whatever with no accountability, and you know that you don't have the evidence to back that up, you got to stop. For a normal individual outside of the legal profession, it's one thing. They're still held to that standard. But for you to be a experienced, long-time attorney doing this stuff is unacceptable. And it might indicate to us a power grab, or the level of power that you think you have, and the level of invincibility that you also think you have. So we have a couple more intermissions. So returning to the video.
Steve Thomas, one of the Ramsey's accusers in his book. And I'm not at liberty because those individuals have claimed confidentiality. They don't want their testimony made public, just as Chris Wolf has not wanted some of the things we've learned about him made public. The Ramseys have not claimed confidentiality, and that's why you were able to obtain copies of their deposition yesterday.
And in fact,
but we've learned a lot from those other, excuse me one second, we've learned a lot from those other depositions. I can't give you the details, but I can tell you this with confidence. that there is no evidence that exists that supports the involvement of John and Patsy Ramsey in the death of their daughter. And this investigation has not thoroughly followed up on many leads of legitimate individuals who should have been investigated long ago.
Several times during this deposition, Mr. Hoffman asked if Patsy was involved in writing the ransom note. We're going to take a look at her response, followed by...
That's a lie. Thousands of leads. 17, I think, to 19 states that they looked at. Again, just on air, saying anything. Because at this point, you're just not willing to give anybody credit, is what it is. I'm not willing to give you credit, even if you've done it. And we have to question somebody's integrity at that point. If you're not, even if somebody did something and you're not willing to give them credit for doing it, you're just willing to obfuscate the truth through and through, that's wild. You must be stopped.
By her husband's response to a similar question asked the following day.
Sure. Did you write the ransom note that was found on December 26th at your Boulder home?
I believe you've already asked me that, and I said I did not write the ransom note, no.
And did you have anything to do with the death of your daughter?
No, sir, I did not.
I base my opinion on that I know my wife. I would stake my life on the fact that she did not murder her child.
And John wasn't being truthful here, I don't think, based on sources, because, well, in this same interview, they're asking him, how do you know about, how do you know your wife, like, for a fact, is not, guilty of writing the ransom note? And right here, he's telling you, well, I know my wife. So just based on that fact, period. But then Darnay kept going, and he said, oh, I've talked to my counsel, and Lin Wood jumped in finally and said, well, you're assuming that, he hasn't gotten the information from his counsel. No, we weren't assuming that. That's actually the question I was asking you. Have you talked to your counsel, more specifically?
Did not fake all of this nonsense, and she did not write this bizarre note.
Of course, the ransom note has been a major bone of contention. Many people do believe that Patsy Ramsey did write this note. Why is that the overall sense, in your view?
Well, that's the only thin thread that anyone can in any way hang their hat on to make an accusation against Patsy. But let's look at the truth about the ransom note. The Boulder authorities hired 4 of the individuals they considered to be the foremost handwriting experts in the country. 3 of those experts said that there was no indication that Patsy Ramsey had authored the note. 1 of those experts found indications but did not and would not state that Patsy was the author. The combined...
They kept asking Patsy for handwriting samples. More. Patsy didn't want to give any more handwriting samples. Right? We talked about Chet Bowski from the CBI. Said, we can roll out John, but we can't roll out Patsy. That's going to come up again. We can roll out John conclusively, but we can't rule out Patsy. And by extension, well, not by extension, we can't rule out Burke either. And that's according to the forensic analysis of some different items of clothing that I looked at this past weekend. Those reports, they went ahead and said, now we can roll out John, we can roll out John Andrew, we can roll out Melinda, blah, blah, blah. However, we can't exclude or include for this particular item, Patsy and Burke. And then for another item, we can't exclude or include Patsy or Burke. I think it was for the long johns and the Barbie nightgown that they could neither include nor disclude. And a special point to note on the forensic analysis of those items. I think there were 4 pieces that I was reading in the forensic report. 4 pieces that were tested. 2 of those pieces were able to be tested. The other 2 were not. Or it was the same piece, but different parts of it. But they could not test the different pieces at any rate. They couldn't test the different pieces because of the unreliability of the DNA. Number 1. And Well, anyways, they couldn't test the reliability of the DNA is essentially what they came to. But we know that Burke and Patsy were not able to be excluded or included, but John was. So we have here kind of this idea that John can be let go of in terms of the handwriting, but we can't get rid of Patsy. So we know that it's possibly some circulation. It's possibly some circulation around Patsy, at least. Just a little bit of circulation. We're not making any claims. We're just talking about a little bit of circulation. That's it. That's it.
And the result of those experts clearly has been, as admitted by District Attorney Alex Hunter, that there was little possibility, very low possibility, that Patsy Ramsey wrote that note. It is very difficult for one to be.
What does Alex Hunter know about this case? The more I read interview notes and I go through this case, I don't find Alex Hunter's name on anything. On anything. So it makes me wonder, why are you talking? You don't know anything about this case. Why are you talking? You're just a spokesperson. You don't sit in the meetings. You don't talk to anyone. How much do you legitimately know about this case, and how much can you be used as a legitimate source of confirmation of something? You know what I mean? You're not a handwriting expert. You guys reject, as Darnay Hoffman was making the point in this deposition, there were two people. They rejected, I think the DA rejected the handwriting of those two individuals for whatever reason. I think Michael Caine said, I think you guys weren't thorough enough in your analysis. I think he said, or he tried to insinuate. But DA Hunter is not a handwriting expert at all. So the only reason that the handwriting was the handwriting analysis from those two experts was rejected is because they said essentially what Michael Caine was saying is that this is not objective enough. Why he didn't come back and ask them to write a more objective report is beyond me. But essentially he was saying this is not objective enough. But what would DA Hunter know about handwriting analysis? You know what I mean? Like, you're not even involved in this case. So can't even use, like, the way that you use DA Hunter as an authoritative figure in this case, to me, it's misleading because he has nothing to do with this case. And I guess right now would be another good point for an intermission to kind of jump off on this. Continuing to look at the personality or the things that people get themselves into. Attorney must pay $3.75 million for defamation. Lin Wood found guilty of defaming former colleagues. This is August 17th of 2024. So we just read from March. We went from 2023, middle of 2023, to sort of early part, middle of 2024. And now we're kind of moving to the latter half of 2024. First part of the latter half, I could say. Still the summertime. Retired Atlanta defamation attorney Lin Wood must pay three of his former colleagues $3.75 million after defaming them to thousands of his social media followers, a jury in Atlanta has decided. The jury found that Lin Wood's comments about his former colleagues published on the Telegram app in 2021 were at least negligent. Shortly before suing Wood and his firm in August of 2020, Wade, Grunberg, and Wilson offered to settle their grievances against them for $1.25 million. Lin Wood said, bet. That ain't good enough for me. I'm in hot water. I know that you guys are not extorting me. They try to settle, and he knew it could get worse. But Lin Wood said, I don't care. Again, going to the point of talking about Lin crossing the line. How risk-seeking are you? Right? There are risk-averse, risk-neutral, and risk-seeking. We talk about Lin Wood being that individual who likes to go up to the line. I like to go up to the line, and sometimes I like to cross it, but sometimes it's going to bite you. It's going to bite you. It's going to reach right out and boom. They gave you an opportunity to back out at 125. You said, no, I ain't going to do that. Not me. I'm too bullheaded. I'm too strong-willed. I'm too established in this game. You youngins think y'all going to come against me? All right. Know when it's time to sit it down. This is a very large verdict for defamation cases in the state of Georgia, especially against a very accomplished defamation attorney, Bill said, and he's the one that was representing those three lawyers. You get penalized when you speak the truth, Wood told the jury. People don't want to hear it. I spoke out to defend myself. Sometimes the truth feels like a weapon. So again, playing the victim. When you shouldn't have said the stuff that you said, you shouldn't have turned loose your social media followers on people to do what they were doing and to defame, to get, it's like sending people to go give bad reviews on a restaurant, even though these people have not been to that restaurant. You're sending people to go give bad reviews just because you're upset at something that the business has done. You personally, right? If you want to give them a 1-star review, have at it. But to go essentially have other people do it would be a lie because they've not been to the restaurant. And I think Google and Yelp actually started kind of cracking down on that because they were, you can't tear down somebody's business just because you've had a grievance and you're just one person. Let it be truth that, these other people went before you say that. And so, but Lin Wood didn't give these other people that opportunity, these other lawyers that opportunity. He just kind of sent people over there and said, go tell the bar. And so you flood the bar's email inboxes with nonsense and lies. So essentially now they got to investigate you for it. Wood said he had grown to despise the legal system that for decades he loved being a part of. So you mad. Okay, so now you mad. Oh man. When you speak the truth, people penalize you. I now despise the legal system. Man, I can't think of this. But essentially being upset, scorned, stupid. Okay, I loved fighting for. Okay, he's still on the soapbox. I loved fighting for truth and justice. Would testify. He's in court he's in court in front of the jury saying all of these things. It's over. Wood testified, the legal system is corrupt and it's evil. It's not fair to people. Oh, really? Lynn, I love fighting for truth and justice. The legal system is corrupt and it's evil. I mean, we're kind of saying the same thing about your handling of the Ramsey case, man. Kind of felt like some of this stuff was corrupt. Like your peers said, antagonistic, obfuscating, obstructing, right? Your peers are saying, okay, I said obfuscating. Take that out. Let's remove that. Obstructing, antagonizing, right? Contentious. Those are combative. Those are all words to where like you're a child. You can think of a child who just won't let you do anything, or you can think of an individual who just likes to argue about everything. And you're like, dude, I'm not even trying to argue right now. I'm just trying to talk to you. Please. I'm just trying to talk. That's what Lin Wood is. And as you can see, as we look at, or if you re-examine some of those interviews, have that in mind if on your own time as you re-examine. So he goes on to say in June of 2023, Wood was found in contempt and fined $5,000 for violating a 2020 court order that barred him from disparaging Wade, Grunberg, and Wilson. The three lawyers claim they left Wood's law firm because of his erratic and threatening behavior toward them. They have set up their own firm specializing in defamation cases. Okay.
Patsy Ramsey wrote that note. It is very difficult for one to be eliminated as the author of an individual writing because we all tend to learn how to write in similar ways. But the dissimilarities are so great that I believe any legitimate examiner would conclude that there's little or no chance that Patsy Ramsey wrote the note, which is the conclusion of the Boulder Authorities experts.
Mr. Wood, in closing, as I mentioned before, it has been almost 5 years since JonBenet Ramsey was found brutally murdered in the basement of the Ramsey home. In your view, if neither John nor Patsy Ramsey was responsible, will the killer ever be found?
The killer will not be found, Katie, unless the Boulder authorities finally will admit that they have had a flawed and failed investigation and will go back and start afresh. Include the Ramseys in the investigation, but go back and do what's never been done before. Follow the evidence, investigate the suspects thoroughly, and don't wear blinders and look only inside the Ramsey household. There has not been a legitimate investigation of this case, and the public will ultimately know that. The civil litigation will ultimately reveal the truth that this family has been falsely accused by a failed
Okay,
investigation.
going into the home stretch, got this in the last video. Lin Wood hit with $105,000 fine for social media posts. Retired lawyer already faced $4.5 million in defamation. Verdict. Less than a month. Now, we don't 2023, summer of 2023 in July. They wrote about this because Lin Wood was already in hot water. We went to March 2024, and we went to August of 2024, August 17th to be exact. This is September 11th of 2024. September 11th, more specifically, a very important day in terms of American history for 9/11 in 2001. Right? So that's very significant. So Lin Wood, days shy of a full month on a very, I would call it patriotic day, deeply, a deep sense of pain for America. Obviously, there's other, I've heard people, rage against 9/11, but anyways, just in general of what it's supposed to be. Less than a month on 9/11, the significance. Now, Lin Wood talked on the Independence Day. He talked on Independence Day about how he was being persecuted. And now he's on 9/11. Kind of, again, we talked about the symbolism. He waits to 9/11 to talk crazy. And he's been talking crazy, but on 9/11 he gets hit. Less than a month after the verdict of his with defamation, retired attorney, Atlanta defamation attorney Lin Wood has been fined $105,000 for other disparaging posts about them. The sanction was handed down Monday by Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee. So you had Michael Brown, and now you got Scott McAfee. She's talking crazy. Who found that Wood violated a non-disparagement order on 7 specific occasions. They counted between June of 2023 and July of 2024. Wood's social media posts about his former colleagues, attorneys Nicole Wade, Jonathan Grunberg, and Taylor Wilson, suggested in part that they were thieves, liars, backstabbers, and children of the devil. McAfee kept his June 1st, 2023 promise that he would fine Wood $15,000 for any future violation of the non-disparagement order, imposing that sanction for each of the 7 posts made about Wade, Grunberg, and Wilson since then. The first of the 7 posts came on June the 2nd, just hours after McAfee had held Wood in contempt and fined him $5,000 for previous disparaging posts. Maybe you thought the judge was playing. Maybe you thought that you could do anything you wanted. Coming from an individual who has been in this game for 46 years, in the experience that you have, a little bit cocky. You know what I mean? Like, you're a little bit cocky. Just stop. Just be quiet. Stop being combative. Just follow the order. If you would have never sometimes you got to be smart. And sometimes people get on your nerves and they frustrate you, but you don't respond in the way that you're responding. You just do it in another way. Do it the right way. Lin Wood said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go up to the line and I want to talk crazy. Risk seeking. I'm not being risk neutral in this. I'm going to fire away. Hours after you were told to stop. The first of 7 posts came June 2nd, hours after. Wood told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that he disagrees with McAfee's order, but cannot financially afford to immediately appeal it. If you know that you didn't have the money then and you don't have the money now, why would you run your mouth? Just be quiet. That's an option. Being quiet is an option. You can do that. If you know that you don't have the money, why are you talking? Combative. Just to be combative. No reason. Antagonistic. All the things that your peers are saying about you. Here we go. Wood told the Atlanta Journal, "I disagree with this. And after the hearing last week, I imposed a gag order on myself. And I don't plan to ever again mention Wade, Wilson, and Grunberg on social media," Wood said on Monday. Lin, why didn't you impose a gag order on yourself prior to? You would think, but sometimes you get too big for your britches. You just say too much. You would think that, again, a guy with 46 years in the game this is such a rookie mistake. You should have put a gag order on yourself. This is an opportunity for you to play chess and strategize around these people and say, okay, I want to say this, I want to do this, but let me do it in this way. But you didn't do that. You went directly at him, saying things that you knew weren't right, asking people to do things that you knew were professionally questionable and ethically questionable. And now you want to impose a gag order on yourself after you just racking them up. Some of Wood's posts included photographs of Wilson and Wade, while others contained photographs of Grunberg's children. When you go to the line and you stay on that line again, risk seeking, you stay on that line. Sometimes you cross, like I said, sometimes you cross that line. Y'all went out and sued the Globe, I think it was, for posting about Burke, essentially saying, don't bring this kid into it with no evidence. And it's trashy of y'all to bring this kid into it anyway, to bring Burke into it anyway. But yet, years later, you go and do the same thing. You're bringing this individual's kids into it. You have no boundaries. So again, the very thing you guys always know what other people should be doing, and the very thing that you guys try to come, and sue people for, you turn right around and do. Don't cheat the system. But then you send out Ollie Gray to go get another guy. And then this guy breaks in somebody's house and brings back the information to Ollie Gray. And Ollie Gray, knowing that he shouldn't have that information, tries to use it. You know that's wrong. Stop. Wood said in a September 6, 2023 post that the three attorneys' case against him was a multitude of false accusations intended to destroy me and my reputation. So again, I'm under duress. I'm being attacked. These people are terrible, but yet I am valiant. I will fight to the death. And so it's nonsense. So anyways, going on the home stretch, this final Katie Couric interview.
Unsolved mystery and a surprising announcement today in Boulder, Colorado. More than 11 years after the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, the district attorney says her parents and brother have now been officially cleared of any involvement.
This is contestant number 15.
The body of JonBenet, a 6-year-old beauty queen, was found in the basement of her Boulder home the day after Christmas, 1996. Hours earlier, her mother, Patsy, said she had found a ransom note in the home demanding $118,000 for JonBenet's return. But investigations by police and prosecutors soon zeroed in on both Patsy and John Ramsey, JonBenet's father.
They do remain under an umbrella of suspicion, but we're not ready to name any suspects.
The Ramseys always denied killing their daughter, and today, Boulder DA Mary Lacey agreed. Lacey says new DNA technology has found evidence that some of the clothing worn by JonBenet. Lacey says
but we're not ready to name any suspects.
The Ramseys
I think that is Lin Wood.
always denied killing their.
I think that is Lin Wood, who was, because I saw somewhere that Lin Wood was a pallbearer. So either this is Lin Wood, I think, if I had to guess, or this is Lin Wood. But I think this is probably more likely going to be Lin Wood based on his sort of the structure of his head.
Their daughter, and today, Boulder DA Mary Lacey agreed. Lacey says new DNA technology has found evidence that some of the clothing worn by JonBenet when she was murdered had been handled by an unknown male. In a letter to John Ramsey, Lacey writes, "This evidence has vindicated your family, including you, your wife Patsy, and your son Burke." And the DA said,
No, it didn't. No, it didn't. This is the most obfuscated fact, in my opinion. No, it didn't. We're going to talk about it. But when you go and you look at the forensic analysis done by Bode Technology, when you go and look at it, John Andrew, and Melinda, essentially for everything, they were excluded. But in terms of the nightgown, certain pieces of the nightgown, because first of all, they grabbed like 4 parts of the nightgown and 4 parts of the pants, the long johns. This is on the internet. That's what I'm saying. This is on the internet. Analysis done by, I think Paula Woodward did this. I'm sorry, this is on her website. But Bode Technologies did the analysis in later periods of the investigation. It was initially done by, I think, the CBI in Cellmark Technologies, Cellmark Labs. They had done it, and Bode Technologies didn't find anything different than Cellmark did in 1997. When I was going over my understanding of the forensics, when I was going over that analysis, like I said, John Andrew, and Melinda, they were ruled out like fully in terms of the DNA, which is funny. I want to talk about that, which is funny because John said, especially if we're talking about on the basis of touch DNA, right? John said, and it's funny that he was ruled out in terms of the wrist ligatures, because John said that he had tried to untie the wrist ligatures. He had tried to untie it, and it was so tight that he couldn't get it undone, which means that he put some force in a little bit of force to try to get it done. So his DNA should have been on the wrist ligatures. His DNA was not. Patsy, none of the immediate family's DNA was found on the wrist ligatures or the neck ligature. None of them. However, they could not include or exclude Patsy and Burke for the nightgown. I think it was the bottom of the interior and the exterior of the nightgown. And then I think on the left-handed side, it might be on the right-hand side, but on the left-hand side of the long johns, inside and outside, they could not exclude or include Patsy and Patsy and Burke. John was excluded fully, unequivocally. He was excluded. Patsy and Burke, not the same thing. They had to remain. Again, that's consistent with the ransom note in terms of Patsy. We cannot exclude Patsy. So while Lin Wood and John and all these guys try to say that Patsy was completely excluded, no, she was not. She remained under the umbrella of suspicion, which might indicate to us, if it's triangulating around Patsy, Patsy may have done something. Because they talk about wiping things down on JonBenet's body. Very possible. Trying to remove things. Very possible. So the fact that, but then Denver PD collected a sample for an unknown male, and then they tested that and they said we can't exclude that. But consistently in all of the reports, they said that JonBenet was the major contributor, and then anybody else was a minor contributor. And sometimes say, for example, on the I think on the Long Johns, uh, they try to put markers in 4 places. Point A and point B they were able to test, but point C and point D they were not able to test because the touch DNA was not substantial enough, so they did not test it. The reports go on to say that this is a mixture of at least JonBenet and another male at least, but they go on to talk about it could be more individuals, which is what 9 News said. This is a mixture of more individuals than one, meaning that several people got their hands dirty. Somewhere along the line, it could be the case that Patsy and Burke had their hands on something in JonBenet, but this is the explanation that they use to explain away Patsy and Burke. Given that Burke and Patsy are in contact and in shared spaces with JonBenet, then it's probable that that's where it came from. That's a dang lie. And it's too presumptive because John also shares space with JonBenet. Why is John's DNA nowhere to be found on anything, even the thing that he said his DNA should be found on? The tape that he took off of her mouth and the rope that he tried to untie. What? How do we not find DNA, just even DNA on that to say, hey, John's DNA should be on this? Because I can understand if you say we're not going to, which they did in some cases, say we're not going to test this part. But I can understand if you say we're not going to test it, but you did test it in terms of the wrist ligatures. You did test it. You should have found John's touch DNA. There should have been flakes. There should have been DNA flaking down onto it, and there should have been fingerprints on there. Makes me question.
I wish we could have done so before Mrs. Ramsey died. Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer 2 years ago. Attorney Lin Wood has represented the Ramsey family for several years. Mr. Wood, what was John Ramsey's reaction to the news?
Well, I would describe him as being extremely grateful for the fact that the investigation is still underway to find the killer of his daughter. Grateful for the fact that he and his family have now been publicly and officially cleared of any involvement in connection with the murder.
What can you tell us about the new DNA test that was used?
They tested the pajama bottoms that JonBenet was wearing at the time of the murder in what's called touch DNA. It's a relatively new science, but it in fact showed that there was DNA evidence on the pajama bottoms that in fact, once profiled, matched the DNA that had been found in her underwear and constituted irrefutable evidence that it's the DNA of the person that was there at that crime scene and murdered this child.
Boulder DA Mary Lacey described it as the DNA of an unexplained...
Like I said, Patsy and Burke could not be excluded.
...third party. Are there any suspects that are now being investigated or considered?
Not that I'm aware of. This case is going to be solved one day by a random hit on the DNA in the database. As you know, many cases that have been gone on cold cases for years, in fact, are solved years later by a random DNA hit.
Patsy Ramsey, as I mentioned earlier, died 2 years.
I think they said they found a hit in Baltimore, and that was in 2008. And I was like, well, what happened to that?
Years ago of ovarian cancer. If she were alive today, what do you think she would say?
I think I think Patsy would hug everybody. That was one of the sad things when I learned the news today, that the fact that Patsy wasn't alive to receive the letter and to know that her family was exonerated publicly. But I can hear Patsy right now. I'm sure she would have looked over and said, "Now let's get busy and let's go find the killer of my child." She would have been very pleased that they were not focusing on her family, but were looking for the real killer.
Lin Wood, the Ramsey family attorney. Lin, thanks very much.
Thank you, Katie.
So as I'm looking at it now, that interview was 7/9/2008. This one, 7/9/2008. And it's funny that he seems to suggest that
exonerated publicly. But I can hear Patsy Renee would hug everybody. That was one of the sad things when I learned the news today, that the fact that Patsy wasn't alive to receive the letter and to know that her family was exonerated publicly. But I can hear Patsy Renee. I'm sure she would have looked over and said, now let's get busy and let's go find the killer of my child. She would have been very pleased that they were not focusing on her family, but were looking for.
Okay, I'll drop it. Anyways, that's the video. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, thanks for sharing. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you for being polite to one another. Continue to do so. And until next video, take it easy.